Welcome to our sixth lecture of the 2019 and 2020 Art Studios Visiting Artist Lecture Series. My name is Kaz Azevedo, and I'm a second-year MFA graduate student and coordinator of this series. I would like to thank our department chair, Annabeth Rosen, the series chair, Graham McDougall, and the Manetti Shrim Museum for their support while we continue our temporary online platform. We also owe a special thanks to the interim dean, Ari Kelman of the College of Letters Science for providing the core funding for the series. There will be a Q&A period after this lecture in which I will explain the process for submitting questions then. But for now, your microphone and chat rooms will be turned off until this time. Harry Gamboa Jr. is an artist, writer, and educator. He is a founder and director of the international performance troupe Virtual Vérité from 2005 to 2017, and co-founder of Asco, the Los Angeles-based performance group, from 1972 to 1985. His work has been exhibited nationally and internationally, including Museum Ludwig of this year, 2020, Autry Museum of the American West, Los Angeles in 2017, Whitney Museum of American Art, New York, 2016, 2015, and 1995 biennial, De La Pelle, Amsterdam, 2014, Centre Pompidou, Paris, France, 2006, and many more. Continuing with the list of exhibitions dating back to Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, 1979, and the Museo de Arte Moderno in Mexico City of 1978. He has received numerous awards, including Rockefeller Foundation of 2004, Durfee Foundation Artist Award of 2001, J. Paul Getty Trust Fund for the Visual Arts in 1990, and National Endowment for the Arts in 1987 and 1980. These are just to name a few. He is a co-director of the Photo Media Program of California Institute of the Arts and a lecturer with the Chicana and Chicano Studies Department at California State University, Northridge. It gives me great honor to welcome Harry Gamboa Jr.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kaz. I make sure this is, I'm strapped to the electric chair, so I guess I'm forced to talk. So I will begin now. We'll have it all enough sufficient voltage, I hope. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about my work. I guess I can always start at the beginning. Every single day seems to make that beginning a little bit of much longer distance, but it actually all was initiated actually on the day I was born, which would have been 1951. 1951 is a very significant year globally in that it was the year that the Nevada nuclear tests were established all throughout my childhood and early teens and even into my late teens. Nuclear bombs were being exploded nearby Los Angeles with nuclear fallout scattering and intermixing with the fog and the smog and living in irradiated pollution. Contributed to the sparkly effect of trying to discern what was real and what was surreal. And in Los Angeles, almost everything is surreal. And Los Angeles is situated on very active tectonic plates that are all fragmented and fractured like a 10,000 piece puzzle. So you can have an earthquake down the block and no one will feel it on the next block. And streets that when I was very young were listed as being east and west are now north and south. And so directional parameters never made quite much sense. And coming from a particular group of people, me being a Chicano, but which played a major role in my focus is that in the 1951s, of course, this would be post-war era. However, people who would have been adults at the time, my parents' age, would have all been World War II veterans, but also would have been veterans of what was known as a Zoot Suit activity. And what had happened in particular in Los Angeles was we had a president, actually President Roosevelt, which unleashed platoons of soldiers and sailors to attack Mexican Americans, males and females, and basically to silence the influence of the Chicanos who had arrived from El Paso, Texas, that were migrating from El Paso, who had a very vast, eclectic background, much different to the people who had been in Los Angeles for many years. These were the people, the inheritors of the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution. And of course, the Mexican Revolution was an international event in which many people from around the world all gravitated to El Paso to watch the great strategist and military actor Pancho Villa, who's been besmirched pretty much by Hollywood standards, but was one of the first to actually utilize photography and cinema to promote his goals, and would actually stage battles. And so you had different kind of influences. You had scientists, you had philosophers, artists from all over the world gathering in El Paso, and then also moving into Boyle Heights of Los Angeles, where I grew up. And so much of the strategy that took place during that era emerged out of that region, and which meant that this whole notion of militaristic thinking, of survival, of being an actor, of being a social activist, was very much connected with the Chicanos. And of course, as we know, Mexican Americans are probably one of the largest demographics, but the term Mexican American emerged after Mexico lost the Mexican American War. And so what you have is descendants of people that had actually battled the United States, and in the process had lost half of their country. And when that took place, of course, Mexico distanced themselves from anyone who was left on this side of the border. And of course, those that were remaining on this side of the border were roundly hated and punished and oppressed. And so this made it quite difficult for people to become organized, but it was during the period of the 40s that the zoot suiters came across with this idea to appear as though you were a diamond in the distance by wearing this sort of very fabulous outfit. But then again, that also made them a very easy target. And then they submerged, and fortunately, many of the strategists and the philosophers of that era survived long enough to become the mentors of many of the Chicano activists of the 60s. And of course, some of us, having been part of the first TV generation and having been irradiated to the maximum, had a different idea where maybe it's better to be a diamond rather than to look like a diamond. And it takes great heat and great pressure. And once you're a diamond, you could cut through all kinds of shit. You could cut through everything and you're indestructible. And basically the indestructibility becomes as a result of having the formulation of ideas and understanding that we as human beings are absolutely infused with star energy originally, and then to be superpowered by the 1600 nuclear blasts probably added a little bit more of an empowerment in a way. And so, so this, of course, was my childhood. Maybe the counterculture of the 1960s. The youth of my generation had a different kind of an impetus in a way, had a different educational system, still kind of encountering people. I mean, I grew up knowing people that had fought in World War I. And so this kind of sharing of knowledge that predated everyone, and to be into a new realm, as it were. And I believe we're probably at a completely new realm now with COVID-19, was a matter of a life or death, and also existentialist as a premise. And of course, being Mexican also meant that there's been sort of a premise of Aztec kind of concepts, as well as Spanish bloodthirst of these two groups when they met. It was kind of very intense moment, which to some degree resulted in a particular expression of understanding of life and death, as well as humor. And the humor is always predicated on the sense that we are already dead, which means there are no limits to the humor. And the extreme of humor can actually encourage bravery and forthrightness. And so, again, going back to the real growing up, I grew up in East LA when it operated very much like apartheid South Africa. There was signage that would restrict people. The area that I grew up in was sort of a very, the demarcation was for the testing of military gear for domestic use against people to oppress them. Also crowd control techniques, various kind of techniques that were actually learned out of World War II, that were learned actually from the side that was vanquished. And because they left all of their documents. And of course, I'm not sure if you all know this, but the person who actually operated LAPD at that point was Chief Parker, who had been the chief architect of transforming Nazi police into domestic police in Germany. And which once you might notice that some of the techniques and strategies and weaponry and uniform very much mimics previous generation of policing and making it suitable for domestic use in America, but using the Mexican Americans at that time as the test subjects. And so to survive a particular era that was so harsh, in which so many young people died, first of all, of childhood leukemia, other forms of cancer that were caused by the nuclear materials, as well as the pollution, as well as the Vietnam War, meant that one had to be strong, lucky, and smart. All three were required. And because there was such a wave of loss. And so, and it's not allowed to have survivor guilt. That doesn't follow through. It's what it is, it's to be propelled into the future, producing work, creating ideas, generating scholarship, generating community, understanding that the falsehood of racism is mass-produced artificial construct, and to continue enthusiastically into old age. And so I was fortunate at a very early age to realize that I saw things differently. On my first day of kindergarten, I was actually affixed with a dunce cap. The teacher very kindly spelled the word Spanish on it, told me I could take it off when I learned to speak English. And my response was to basically learn to speak English better than her and the principal, which I probably did by the 6th grade, and actually to recognize that the school was an unfriendly environment for me, that quite possibly my learning experience would best be taken from the streets of LA, which for me was a very fortunate choice, and which was a very dangerous choice also, and actually to learn from live television, and Los Angeles being often noted as being Hollywood. Los Angeles had a great wealth of information that was being dispensed daily through live television before there was a development of videotape. And so I found that the learning apparatus existed through media and through people who knew how to present themselves, and actually through great accidents and live events. And so by the time I probably reached the age of being interested in generating art, everything and anything that probably would have killed someone else prepared me to take the first photograph. And this is the way I will begin. And I'm going to see if I can get this together to share the screen with you here. I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to pick this, and we're going to play this. Yes, okay. So, So quite often scholars have referred to this image, which is known as spray paint LACMA, as being the first work of Chicano conceptual art. The story goes, I was, I believe, 2021 at the time. I had gone to Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LA County Museum of Art, earlier that day, trying to impress some young girl of my knowledge of art. Of course, I had already been referred to as an artist in some kind of free press newspaper, and had gone to go look at all the artwork. It was the only venue that showed contemporary art, had many floors of artwork. And when we got to the last piece of work, it occurred to me that there was not a single work of Chicano or Mexican art in the museum. I was very irate because, of course, the museum is part of LA County and is dependent on funds from the Mexican American community. I had survived many riots and many other kinds of forms of oppression. I was actually targeted by COINTELPRO, a disinformation project. You might want to take a look at that. And so I was not exactly intimidated by the white walls and the hallowed archways of the museum. And I started pounding on doors until I found myself in the inner sanctum of the lead, the chief curator, and demanded to know why there was no Chicano art. As I entered the room, he was pouring a martini, looked at me, listened to what I had to say, and his response was, Chicanos don't make art, they're in gangs. And so I walked away quietly. I took into consideration, it was pretty brilliant, sharp, quick quip, but felt that maybe we could return and maybe teach him a lesson. It might take a little while for him to learn this lesson. We returned in the middle of the night. And by the way, the museum itself is situated next to the La Brea tar pits, which is on some level a double entendre. This used to be the place where saber-toothed cats roamed. I think I saw one or two that evening. They didn't catch them all. I've always told everyone that the fourth and fifth member of Asco slipped into that tar pit, so we don't talk about them nowadays. But for those of us that made it to this bridge, we spray painted our names on the lower right hand of the museum, thus creating the museum itself to be the first work of Chicano art to be exhibited at LACMA. I took Patsy Valdez in the morning to stand on the bridge to photograph her. This spray paint lasted approximately 4 hours. It was an ephemeral project. Back then, there was no law against it. If 3 young artists were to do that today, each one would represent a separate felony, which means that you would have 3 strikes against you. You would be sent to prison for life for spray painting your name on the museum today. This work, I decided it was shot with a 35 millimeter film. It was Ektachrome 400, no longer made by Kodak. I made duplicate slides, maybe 200 duplicate slides. And this was before the advent of the internet. I had researched a lot of names in a lot of places all across the country and internationally, and sent a statement along with the image everywhere. And suddenly there was sort of a dialogue that was taking place amongst the cognoscenti of that time. But the work itself vanished. There was never a print made of this until 2011. But the knowledge that maybe something was taking place, a different point of view, a different cultural production by Chicanos in LA was emerging. Am I able to move? Oh, here we go. This thing is kind of behaving badly. This image here is known as Instant Mural. Instant Mural involved Asco. This was one of several performances that were done by Asco and projects and conceptual projects by Asco. Asco, of course, meaning nausea, disgust in Spanish, involving 5 artists actually, 4 of which often get the credit. It's Willie Herron, Grunk, Patsy Valdez, Humberto Sandoval, and myself. We were all more or less the same age. muralists had very similar kinds of backgrounds. This project took place on the intersection of Whittier Boulevard and Arizona, and I've written about this particular street corner in an online publication known as East of Borneo that's published out of CalArts, and I think it was titled Against the Wall. This street corner was very important in that Whittier Boulevard was the site of the Chicano Moratorium, one of the largest anti-Vietnam War demonstrations, in which a very famous journalist by the name of Ruben Salazar was assassinated. Many people were killed. Many people were beaten. Many people vanished, were disappeared. Nearly a year later, there was a demonstration to protest the killing of Ruben Salazar. There were 200 peaceful protesters carrying signs and candles. And we were confronted by 25 LA County police officers that opened fire with live ammunition, shooting and killing many, harming many. Los Angeles Times, Los Angeles Herald Examiner declared that one person was killed and I believe 2 people were injured. And of course they claimed that the police were all injured by rocks and other kinds of devices. I did not have a camera at the time. Someone by the name of Victor Alemán took photographs, and you could see his photograph in my article. But that particular location seemed to be a focal point in which I returned with the Asco group to direct everyone to perform actions that in some way would heal the space in a way by performing counter narratives to such violence. And this piece, Instant Mural, and by the way, at this point, Willie Herron and Grunk had become world famous muralists already. They had been declared great by the Exxon Corporation of all things in their annual investor report. I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but many forms of media were paying attention to some of our particular events, kind of out of sequence and not exactly organized properly, but we were always being featured in something or another. And this particular piece involved a single roll of masking tape in which Grunk taped Patsy Valdez and Humberto Sandoval to a wall, in which they remained in place until the masking tape ran out of tape. And there they remained for a few moments, and then they pulled away. And I photographed the whole sequence and made flyers later. And the idea was that most actions of oppression are very fragile, and in some level or another require the psychological participation of the victim to agree to be victimized, to agree to be oppressed. And what it really does mean is that you just simply have to pull away. And once you decide to not follow the constraints of this oppression, you will be free to create art. And so this is what Instant Mural turned out to be. Unfortunately, on some level, a few years ago, the Getty Museum put together their project, which is Pacific Standard Time. And I wasn't paying attention one day, and I'm usually very clear about signing contracts and things, but I was had too much coffee, too much chocolate. There were too many people around me, and someone thrust a piece of paper and said, "Oh, the Getty wants to use a picture or two from you. We don't have any money." And of course, the Getty is, of course, the richest organization in the world. I signed something, and they made 1 million copies of one of my photographs, passed it all over Europe as a test. And when the Pacific Standard Time was used, and I never read the small fine print, and so this is for all the artists to pay close attention when you sign, their co-sponsors were able to use my image. And so Instant Mural appeared suddenly on all of the ATMs of Bank of America for a year, also one of the richest organizations. And for a year, I would take my friends to the ATMs and said, "Listen, we're going to go out and have a drink." And I would type in my last name on the keyboard, and nothing came out. I was never able to get a 20. Okay, so here we go. Oops, let's see if this thing's working. Yeah, come on. Oh, here we go. This piece here is titled First Supper After a Major Riot. This work is significant in that if you look towards on the other side of the woman that looks like she's jaywalking, that is the place where there were 25 police officers pointing their weapons where you are at now. And they opened fire, and you would imagine that the whole street is filled with 200 people in which people were falling. That particular day, which was January 31st, 1971, you'd have to go to microfiche to find this on the LA Times and the Los Angeles Herald Examiner. You'd have to look at February 1st, of course. After all the bloodshed, LA County declared eminent domain, took control of all the property, and dug up all the evidence. That same day, they started building a road that led directly to the 3rd Street substation of the Sheriff Department, which was one of the first domestic police stations to utilize military weaponry, which now is commonplace across the United States. Also, what was imposed that particular day, all the way to this particular point in time, was sort of a mini martial law specific to East Los Angeles, in which Chicano, young Chicanos could not gather in groups of 2 or more. Otherwise, you would be declared of creating a conspiracy. And so we decided at this point, Asco would take on the role of utilizing a traffic island. And by the way, traffic islands are protected by First Amendment free speech, to create a work that would be momentary. And we had a party and we photographed this, and of course we left. And Asco, many of the Asco events all took place within a minute or 2 as a term of survival techniques. And so, and here we go, maybe we can, this thing is just not exactly working very well. Let's see if we can get it to move. Okay, here we go. This piece here is called The Gores, with Axe on Whittier Boulevard. This image represents sort of the way Asco would often operate, which was at night. We would do many photographs, which we referred to as no movies. We would create imagery. I would photograph images that would look like they were a singular frame out of a film. I was actually using the same stock that was used in multi-million-dollar film industry. I've did a lot of investigation, and of course, as we know, films as they're projected are really a sequence of still photographs. And so you never actually see anything move. You imagine that you've seen it move. And when you walk away from the movie theater, what usually remains is a reverberating singular image. I decided that I would forego the multi-million-dollar budget and simply photograph the singular image that would reverberate. And this particular image was involved 3 people that would go out and capture and punish minor petty thieves and set order into East LA. And of course, this was all in fun. And of course, it was all a high fashion. It was all about generating an alternate and sort of an evolution of the zoot suit, as opposed to what was being promoted by standard pop fashion. And of course, and also the idea of the instantaneous retribution. And here, of course, there might be some connection to Spanish punishment, as well as Aztec punishment, as well as the fact that everyone here, every single one of the people here are imbued with the nuclear radiation. And I forgot to mention that those of us who were born in 1951, you can actually find this also. The US government announced in the LA Times that every single one of us born in Los Angeles in 1951, when we die, the government will have access to one of our bones, because each and every one of our bones has the unique atomic signature of each nuclear blast. And obviously it would kill many people, but those that it doesn't kill, it actually gives you a free battery, as I'm explaining and showing to you now. So this idea of being kind of visibly vibrant, one was also invisibly vibrant. When this picture was photographed in the mid-1970s, many things had happened, of course, in the United States. One of the things was that the word Chicano had been introduced into the lexicon. The term Chicano, of course, caught like fire throughout the Mexican-American population. But during the era of Richard Nixon, he found it to be something that he needed to destroy. And so Richard Nixon actually grew up in the outer edges of East LA, grew up in a small town known as Whittier. And Richard Nixon was always a very nervous, very odd person, and was very anti-Mexican, as one can hear in his tapes that were recorded in his office. You could often hear many disparaging remarks directly towards Chicanos. He actually directed the draft to draft Chicanos at a disproportionate era. And during his time, he was surrounded by all of his future thugs and future war criminals that actually formulated the term Hispanic. Hispanic is actually a federal term. It was a federalized term that would delimit funding. One would have to agree to be Hispanic in order to qualify for anything, and to forego the term Chicano, which was being besmirched. And so during this time, many people who wanted to appease and not be so far on a limb started using the term Hispanic until it was completely popularized. You will continue to hear the term Chicano in some neighborhoods and in academia, which is also changing with another recently created term, which I won't mention here. But the term Chicano was actually really promoted by the artists that emerged out of the Southwest and in Chicago, and actually celebrated in Mexico City. And so by this time, the term Chicano was being developed, but yet the term Chicano artist and the art field, which was very segregated at the time, was only going to recognize artists if they painted murals. And so the idea that a group of Chicano artists could be conceptual artists was beyond acceptance. And so, and for those of you that aren't too aware of the geographic location of East LA, East LA is really a 10-minute ride to Hollywood, and it's half an hour ride to Malibu. And so I decided that we would all go to Malibu. I drove everyone to Malibu, and we were looking for a suitable location where all the stars and the billionaires go and where everyone hides their money. And I decided that we would be photographed at the primary, and by the way, the Pacific Ocean is absolutely filthy right off of Malibu because the sewage is directly dumped into the ocean. And so I wanted to go to the place where all the movie star shit comes out of. And so we titled this piece, Asshole Mural, which has multiple connotations, I'm sure. This piece, of course, has been celebrated since then for various reasons. This particular piece is called Decoy Gang War Victim, and I'm going to make sure I keep track here so I know exactly what my time is. This is called Decoy Gang War Victim. This piece was photographed during the time of the martial law in East LA. This was up the street from where some of the most, the major death count was during the Chicano moratorium. This was also during an era when they were utilizing something known as mercury vapor lamps that would emit dangerous wavelengths for people, but it created this beautiful blue aura. And I felt that it would be very interesting to counteract negative stereotypes that were being promoted by television news and the local newspapers, which were very high-powered news. The LA Times, every issue during that period of time weighed about 5 pounds. On the Sunday edition, you need somebody else to help you carry the newspaper. Everyone used to read newspapers back then. This was owned by the Chandler family, a very large right-wing family. And the counter newspaper was the LA Herald Examiner, which was a Hearst newspaper. They were constantly competing with each other to sell newspapers. One thing they caught on in the early 70s was to focus on Chicano gangs. I grew up in East LA, and gangs were a very small fraction of the population, but it was something very easy to demonize, to fantasize about, to promote. The LA Times did something more, and the Herald Examiner did something more. They provided the names and addresses of family members, children, workplaces, biographical information, photographs of gang members, people who were purported gang members, listing the names of gang members, issuing threats against gang members, mentioning that they had committed particular crimes against other gangs. And of course, what they did was fan the flames of retribution, in which each and every single day they were able to then provide something. Now we have Google Maps, back then we had that, and they provided a roadmap to generate gang warfare. And it was very obvious what was taking place. And so I felt that it would be kind of interesting to go out and photograph the last gang member to ever be killed. And so I had Grunk lay on the street. I laid out the road flares, put up a little red lamp out there, give it a little bit of dramatic flair, use a long lens, photograph this, made a 35 millimeter slide, which just seemed to be just right. I made multiple copies. Within a week, I had a haircut, I threw on a suit, I had a briefcase, and I knocked on the doors of all the independent television stations in Los Angeles, met with the news directors, and had written up the copy and had explained to them that I had a scoop for them, which was the last gang member to get killed. And this, of course, was broadcast on some of the television stations. And you might want to take a look at the catalog of global conceptualism from Queens Museum, which declared this to be one of the top conceptual moments of the 20th century. This image, of course, reverberated, and in the end wound up appearing in many books, and ultimately wound up on the cover of Art Forum, which went across the artscape, as it were. And of course, this is part of this is now in the collection of the Whitney Museum and the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So it became part of Americana. It became a very American action at this point. I need to mention one thing about the term Chicano. I was part of the original group of people who sat together. Way back, I was a leader, one of the student leaders of the 1968 walkouts. I knew all the different people that were involved in this. We voted to utilize the term Chicano and to then fill the word with a definition. And so, but part of the notion of Chicano was to also understand that we were Americans, and to be understood as Americans, as a distinct group of Americans. And of course, one has to look at the whole history of Mexican-American involvement, being very loyal, very dedicated, very great warriors, and working, of course, and being part of the workforce. And of course, also being declared the internal enemy simultaneously. And so, and as of course, and with the recent wars, you have people that go out and fight whatever wars that have been declared or undeclared. When they get home, they find that their families have been deported, and they often are also deported too. And so you will find that there's organizations on the other side of the border known as deported veterans. And of course, when you have other people making documentaries about veterans, the Chicanos are often left out. And of course, there's a very small park in El Paso, Texas, filled with statues of all the Chicano warriors. But anyone who actually is able to produce and continue in their education, and people who are able to be cognitive of the fact that we contribute to this country in whatever way, and that we make friendship with everyone who's out there and with us, that in itself is also a form of warriorship, of making sure that we are understood to be part of the overall American population, not to be declared rapists and killers, as the current president was elected, generating hatred. And so for me, I take it quite personally, the insult, and knowing that there's a long heritage of people who have done everything to make everything better for every one of you here today, as well as for me. And so, and I feel that I have played along in that particular role of contributing to the American understanding that we should accept some level of diversity, and that Chicanos have much to offer. And this is only a small sliver of the spectrum of which should be considered. Maybe one of the things, I'll just show you a few images because I know we're kind of going kind of fast here. Towards the 80s, I started creating something known as fotonovelas. Fotonovelas, of course, were pretty much like graphic novels using photography. This all emerged after World War II, very popular in Europe, in Italy, and in Spain, and in Mexico. Actually, even Federico Fellini made a film about a fotonovela star titled White Chic. But the Mexican fotonovelas, and one would have to become familiar with Mexican culture. It's very extreme, it's very dramatic. It's like living opera, as it were. Everything is an allowance for an emotional outburst, and all of it is theatrical in a way. And all one has to do is look at Spanish language soap operas known as novelas, which is one of the national products of, and everyone copies this. And of course, but to utilize the fotonovela process was to create a narrative in which the images themselves stand out, but the concept would also stand out. And so in the early 1980s, I moved from doing the no movies into making fotonovelas, and this one was about two bag bombers, and this was all kind of early concept about how people were disrupting society, and yet they're very smart and witty, and yet showing kind of the harshness and the cruelty and the lack of humanity, but at the same time very concerned about what kind of topping they were going to put on their chocolate sundae that day. And so they're placing bombs wherever they go, and they're looking quite fashionable. And in the end, they have their device there, and finally they've decided what's going to be for dinner, and they blow it up. It's all kind of a joke on some level. But my fotonovelas, which I made for a period of about 4 or 5 years, all involved heterosexual couples undergoing some kind of conflict, all about sort of marital kind of conflict, kind of couples conflict, but utilizing breaking social norms. And so I would write a text, I would record them, and these were all projected on exterior surfaces in neighborhoods at night using slide projectors in which the images appeared 200 feet tall with boom boxes and loudspeakers, in which the neighbors were introduced to what was taking place in their neighborhood and kind of giving and disrupting the neighborhoods. And we would go from neighborhood to neighborhood all across Southern California, breaking the parameters of the social constraints of who lived in what neighborhood, and kind of introducing again, and all of them kind of had this kind of dark humor of what it was all about. And of course, no one ever actually got injured, but also kind of introduced the notion of the possibility that there might be some level, and as I was mentioning earlier, sort of physically and metaphorically, star power. This image recently went up, and I received a message from the El Pato hot sauce factory, which is on Boyle Heights, that they'd like to own this. Of course, they want it for free, so I said, give me some chili, please. This image also is titled No Phantoms. One of the things about Los Angeles, and I've written about it recently, actually, in a publication titled Communism. I taught a course in Belgium, a group of scholars in Europe, which I'll show some images. But basically, my concern is about the diminishing availability of public space in urban settings. Public space being funded by taxpayers, by people being able to use things, and everything is privatized. So if you go throughout the city of Los Angeles and you look at your feet, there's often little plaques that will say this is private property. you might be able to use it, but they can actually throw you off of there. And other pieces of property have multiple plaques, and you're under multiple jurisdictions. So any infraction of any one particular rule means you could be charged by up to 20 separate charges and serve them concurrently, as it were. And so the smallest thing can actually set you up for a lifetime of incarceration. So here we decided to photograph on one of, at that point, the tallest, at the base of the tallest skyscraper in Los Angeles, and in which someone lost their head. Here, again, playing with the same notion. This is Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill is a major location in Los Angeles. When I grew up, it was actually a hill. It was probably as tall as some of these skyscrapers. And actually, the Chandler family had something to do with leveling that hill. This particular hill was very important in the Mexican-American War. This is where the contingent of soldiers came in to shoot Mexicans from the high ground and to win over Los Angeles. In the beginning of the 20th century, it was where the wealthiest people lived. They made Victorian homes. And by the 1940s, they were falling apart. There's many films that were shot there. A lot of film noir films were shot there. But by the late 1970s, everything had been leveled. They eliminated a population of about 1 million minorities, primarily Mexican-American, African-American, and indigenous population. It was then replaced with becoming the financial center. I never forgot this. And one day I was looking around, and I've done a lot of different types of work, and I know that banks are very litigious. And so I decided to pull a pretty good one on them. And I went off and bought a big sheet of plastic, photographed this, and wrote up some copy and made sure that the local newspaper of that area, which is known as Downtown News, which I know is distributed on every single floor of every single bank and every single law firm that's there, and titled it Skyscraper Skin. It didn't take much longer, too long for various owners and different organizations to threaten me with a lawsuit until I returned their skin back. So, and of course they never got it back because they don't have it. And I don't know, this is Sylvia Duran, someone who was just cool, and I guess she's still cool. This image here is from another fotonovela, and this all involves people enjoying themselves to the extreme. This one here also, which is called Excess Party, which again, in a way, was dealing with consumerism, in which you had two different individuals who are addicted to everything that's in pop culture, reading newspapers, eating sweets, watching TV, smoking, drinking, except they both have different powers. One can become invisible. The other one can control magnetism. These two people, by the way, were kind of high-profile individuals at the time. The person in the white hair became an actor, known primarily for his role as someone played as Little Puppet in the film called American Me. And the person on the right is Therese Covarrubias, who was a very well-known punk rock singer and influenced many people in the 1980s. So they were very, and we shot this in a very small apartment in Boyle Heights. This here involved a couple in which, and again, it's the whole notion of people not wanting to let go. And I decided I would use an electrified fence. And this way it was impossible to let them go. I think they're still there. Here I use sort of playing with genetics. This person is named Anthony Sandoval. I've known him since he was conceived, basically. He's the son of my friend, Umberto Sandoval. He and his son were kind of distant as a result of the relationship breaking off. But I've been very good friends with Anthony and Umberto Sandoval. Anthony since he was born, of course. But Anthony has inherited probably everything that his father has. And so I photographed Anthony 1 year, and then I photographed his father a couple of years later, and they both have the exact same kinetic energy. So part of what I do is sort of a visual investigation. At the beginning of the 21st century, I organized my group. Asco, by the way, was full of stars. and turned into a supernova, and it collapsed into a red dwarf and ultimately became a black hole and got lost in Asshole Mural. And so, of course, it's been retrieved many times by many scholars, but it kind of still is deep in that well. Virtual Vérité never actually existed, partially existed, somewhat existed, was never actually a group, but actually incorporated a sort of a core group of performers that spanned from Los Angeles to Mexico City to Stockholm, Sweden, Berlin, Paris, France, and Helsinki, and a few other places in between, as well as across the United States. And at the beginning of the 21st century, there was sort of this remaining angst, which used to be referred to as 20th century angst. And 20th century angst was worried that something that we're living through now would ever happen. I decided that I would photograph four of the most highly acclaimed scholars that I've known at the time to perform for me. And of course, here we have someone who's probably known in Chicano art field, Mario Flores, Lucy Cepeda, Jennifer Sternad, and Victor Carrillo, all of course, having attended schools like Harvard and Princeton and Yale and all the people at sort of the top tier schools, performing, looking fashionable, and at the same time can kick your ass. And so, and this, of course, began sort of my introduction of presenting visuals and text to very large groups of email recipients all around the world. I had been part of the mail art movement, MAIL movement, and I was now doing the emails in which various kind of actions would take place. This is part of one that became sort of a published fotonovela. But the idea again of how can you kind of live out a character, contribute to the landscape. LA is a matter of, exists on a desert landscape. It's all about mirage. It's all about false miracles. And my job is to make them happen, to have people look at miracles and mirages, which actually contribute to dreaming and to creativity. And so much of the work that I've done throughout my life has never been photographed and never been documented. It's all about inserting actions to trigger responses. For instance, this work here is titled Pearls. This is a group of people that were put into a doorway, but yet it comes off as being a particular, kind of a symbolic image. And this, of course, has been blown up and has been flown outside of some of the Smithsonian museums in Washington, DC, has been shown in various places across the country and in Europe. And of course, these people, of course, are artists themselves and go off, but for a fraction of a moment, they're constrained. And at the same time, the notion of what the pearl, the string of pearls might mean. And of course, who is allowed to wear pearls? And of course, it was a signifier out of the 1950s of television, who was allowed to wear pearls and who was not allowed to wear pearls. And where do pearls come from? And of course, the artificial creation of pearls and where they count. And it's all about beating things together. And of course, it's all the molecular structures. And this is also basic coding that exists in the universe and is then manipulated by human beings. And so, and of course, this has appeared numerous places. This image, and I'm not sure if the other, oh here, let me just go back with, I guess, the previous image, if we can go there. This image actually was from a panorama of about 100 people, which was taken one day when I decided to buy everyone coffee or something, and it wound up being reproduced and was presented on all the subway stations of Los Angeles and circulated for several years. This image also from the Virtual Vérité. If you look at some of the images from Virtual Vérité, it was always about people off balance, encountering the imbalance. And through that, you can achieve stasis. And I know that I've hit my 1 hour, but I will just go a little bit more here. This also was something about sort of connectedness, but yet not connectedness. We're tethered and yet untethered. And we're actually allowed to go off and constrained. And so this is people witnessing things they shouldn't be seeing. And I think I'm going to just go through this really quickly. I've done many works involved documenting Chicano men. Many of these men are very famous. Luis Perez from Los Lobos. This is Rupert Garcia. This is Willie Heron. Maybe one last one here I'll just show you and we can go off to questions. I did a series of photographs at the time of the total solar eclipse. And during the total solar eclipse, a very interesting moment during the last one in particular, because it was televised, was the idea that the natural response to a solar eclipse is a human being will burst into tears and uncontrollably. But also at the same time, you will find that all across the country, scientists and military will do tests that last only a fraction of a few minutes. And so this was an art test that would take place prior to and after a solar eclipse, in which I had a cadre perform certain actions, certain social actions that would be unseen, that would be invisible and would be secret, and no one would be able to talk about it, but would actually function as altering the parameters and the function of society as we did. And so we did this, and I wrote this for a piece, and maybe if you just kind of look up on my work, you'll see that this was a group of people that were able to change the orbit of the Earth and the actual counting of the minutes, which has actually happened in the last few years, in which we've had to recalibrate the atomic clock because various earthquake events and other things have altered the counting of the seconds. We have lost some seconds and we've actually moved some space. And so maybe I'll end it here for the imagery. And I guess, I believe I'm at the hour, yes? Kaz, am I correct, or am I have more time to go?
Yes, that's fine. We can start opening up for questions if you like.
And so do I stop sharing here, yes?
Yes,
Yeah.
Go ahead and stop sharing your screen.
Okay, so here I will. With this, and then I can see you again. Okay, I see you again. And now I can see everybody who's looking at me.
Yes, you should. I'm going to unpin you, and that way we should be able to see everyone in the gallery view. And we can open the questions now. The chat box is open. If anyone would like to submit a question via the chat room, please do so. We can also go through some images. If there's the reactions, if you want to use the hand raising reaction too, we can also use that. But I believe last time the chat room worked out good for us. Hopefully everyone has access to that. Thank you very much, Harry. That was an excellent lecture. I enjoyed it tremendously. So many great information that, I mean, your life knowledge that you shared with us is just very, very generous. Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's any questions or not, or are they able to access the chat box? Right at the bottom where it says chat, you can, oh, okay. Please ask a question.
Well, I know for myself, I felt like, I mean, just the last part where you're talking about like the changing the orbits and then like can you like elaborate a little bit more like as far as like what you were talking about as far as that last group of people where you were referring to?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that I've always done is organize people to go out and do what they probably would do anyway. But it's a matter of just pointing and to become aware of your environment and to recognize that we are functioning organisms, and but that at this late great state in our condition that, you know, we're born polluted, and we're born being subject to multiple wavelengths simultaneously. And so on some level, how is someone going to be able to not only be harmed by this energy, how do you grab hold of it and use it? And so maybe I'll answer Amelia
Yeah.
asked me a question. And so this idea of where we're at now, this global crisis of COVID-19, in which we're subject to an organism, a virus, and of course a virus is not alive. It's a molecule that's looking for a host that's able to manipulate our DNA and is constantly looking to transform itself. But a virus functions very much like a corporation, and a corporation is very much like a virus. And of course, a corporation is also non-living, and yet over the past few years was actually gifted the rights of human beings, but disproportionately to have the power of $1 billion to then persuade living organisms to follow. And so in a way, the corporations feed off of us like viruses do. And during this time of this terrible disease, and of course you just have to listen to the way things are described, where there are some projections where ultimately to reach herd immunity, you need 1 billion people to become infected. And of course, the fatality rate is between 1 and 5%. Well, just bring out your calculators. That's a lot of people. But even just the terminology, herd, there's something known as culling the herd. That's immediately and immensely anti-personnel, anti-human, eliminates the individual. But we need to really take care that this is quite an emergency, but at the same time, as we find all across, particular everywhere else, where you have such a disenfranchised population without income, without health care, without hope. You find many institutions where you're thrown out and there's no ability to reclaim any of your funds. I personally was supposed to be in Germany and a few other places, and of course, the airlines cancel my flight. They keep my money. They offer me a voucher, immediately getting robbed. And then I work 1 or 2 places and everybody announced a 10% cut, and other places are cutting other kinds of other things. And so I've already been able to add it up, and some places expect me to work all summer. I'm adding it up. It's already a tremendous financial burden, and yet other people are suffering with illness and death. And yet, at the same time, it's used as a pivotal point by which to divide the country, in which people declare they will participate in social distancing, and others will refuse to do that whatsoever and enter your space, making sure that you are unsafe. And so we are in kind of a critical moment where the first thing that always gets cut, and public school systems, of course, are the arts, and anything that promotes higher learning and critical thinking. And this, of course, was already destroyed by George Bush and Obama. And now with this president, it's a complete decimation of higher learning in the United States. You might be amongst the last group that's ever going to have the opportunity to have been trained in such a sufficient manner to fully read a book and to actually read the original documents, because no longer is even cursive being taught, where the original documents will be a foreign language that's not going to be taught. And so no one will actually even know the origination of their rights. And so this is a time, this moment is a time to create. This is a time to learn. This is a time to figure out how can you become empowered even if you are isolated, and we have access to communicate. How can you organize to be in touch with people to further enhance the consciousness of people, and to actually and ultimately to demonstrate love, human love amongst one another, and to realize that this whole issue of generating harm is actually a way of distracting people from their access to resources.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Amelia Jones, for that question. Very much, good to see you. We have another question in the chat box from Nicole.
Hello, Nicole, how are you? And so,
Harry, thank you so much. I'd be happy to hear you talk about your transition to video and public TV.
Her question. So, in the early 1980s, I started working on videos, and so this was a particular moment when they established cable television. It was a very kind of Wild West, and so you had different billionaires that were buying up different neighborhoods and areas in which they literally hardwired televisions to cable. There was one cable network out of an area known as Alhambra, which is a small suburban neighborhood in LA, but they had a very large subscribership, millions of subscribers all up and down the coast of California, which is some of the wealthiest communities in California. And part of the agreement to have these licenses was to allow one public channel, and that would require me to learn how to shoot in video and to edit in video and to create a product in video. And so I created maybe about 30 or 40 or 50 very brief 2-5 minute videos that all were kind of absurdist, comedic, but also very politically charged pieces, one of which is still shown through the Mocha channel on YouTube, known as Baby Cake, B-A-B-Y space K-A-K-E, in which different questions about identity, about gender questions, about political questions, about violence were shown, but also the utilization of language, of sort of the double and triple, quadruple entendre. What is it like to play with language, in which language itself it becomes a medium, something that was becoming lost in pop culture. And so these were being shown. There was one or two pieces that were shown probably thousands of times until I started getting complaints that it was influencing their children, and they replaced it with religious programming. And but many of these works actually were lost, again, because I did not have a formal education in media. These were always copied on used tape, and the stations themselves would erase the tape after they were aired. And so there were some that survived, and fortunately, through the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center under Chon Noriega, he was able to retrieve and secure some of them, and so some of them are still available as a DVD, which is also now an outmoded medium. So yeah, and so that required a different way of thinking and acting and performing. At that same time period, I used to have a radio program on KPFK, which was all about vocal qualities, and so I found that the utilization of this kind of medium was very important, and I continue to do that. I'm not using it on Zoom because Zoom is not up to utilizing video at this point, but every once in a while things happen. So maybe I will, I think I have a chance to go to Gretchen. Gretchen asked a question, and I guess you could all read it through the chat, yes? And so, I work with people, but I guess even from the beginning, I've always kind of been a director on some degree. Asco, of course, actually on Dean Chavoya recently published an article explaining how even from the very beginning, Asco was never a collective. It was an art group. And we ourselves as a group decided that we would all be independent artists working sometimes collaboratively, sometimes competitively, sometimes individually. So each and every one of us had a role. And so to some degree, I was always the person who was directing the imagery, and particularly with the videos, I would write the screenplay, I would cast the people, I would invite which talent I would work for. But of course, I would kind of prompt people and let them go with, and they would respond spontaneously to the prompting. So in that level, there's collaboration, but basically I'm the person who normally knew what the story was going to be. and always the one who was behind the camera. And so, you know, someone asked me recently about my studio, and my studio has always been my backpack. So I do everything, use the equipment and use it all. And so maybe that's the way it's always been. And I guess I continue to do that. Of course, I take on people who, of course, through the experience learn, and many people have gone on to do their own thing. I'm never responsible for what anyone does afterwards, but many people have gone on to become very well-known artists, very well-known scholars, very well-known, but I kind of am cheating because I tend to find the brightest people I can find and invite them to work with me. So I kind of handpick, and then there's I've kind of learned the hard way to make sure that people are somewhat vetted, and I make sure that everyone gets along. And so I want to make sure that no one's harming each other and that everyone's rather polite. And I will respond to Roberto Tejada. Hello, Roberto. Dystopian worldview explored when social action performance lost loops of those and Flower of the Dead. So thank you, Roberto. So Roberto's referring to two of my more recent ebooks, which are listed in the chat at the top. One, which is Lost Loops and Loss, which has actually existed on a hard drive that I was about to throw out, something I wrote 15 years ago. And I kicked the thing and it started up and I realized it was all this written material, and there it is. But, and then Flower of the Dead is something that I wrote within the last 2 months. And it's poems and exists only as an ebook and will probably become something that will be available as a paperback quite soon. But it's the idea of viewing things in the term dystopian. Dystopian is kind of an interesting term. It's, you know, what is the nightmare? We're living it, you know. We're living it even with COVID-19. It's the idea of like, again, we live sort of in this charged environment. And of course, there's as individuals, there's not much we could do except adapt to it. How do we function in harsh environments? Something that's essentially trying to eliminate our thoughts and our actions and our health. Well, one has to be very healthy and very stealthy and very active. And so much of my work acts almost like a libretto. I always kind of view my works as being the libretto. Then I hand on to people, and then you can sing the opera, and you can perform the opera. And in that, there's a connection to the Fotonovelas, as I mentioned earlier. It's this operatic theme where everything is beyond reality, everything is beyond life. Might as well really fulfill your life by living big and expansive in a way, and simply just looking cool, being cool, acting cool, and doing the surprising thing that creates a spark in someone else's imagination positively. So although I might have a dystopian view, the underlying theme is that we need to do something about it that's positive, and that is to be self-affirming as human beings, and to view other people as human beings, and to act upon others as though we are human, and not as objects, and never as a depersonalized, anti-personnel views. And so in that, part of the work is always to kind of guide you through a series of actions and thoughts that might get you somewhere where you weren't before. Not that you have to believe and not that you have to accept, but by the end you've somehow taken a ride, which means it might have some effect. So, and Emmanuel, hello. Skyscraper skin, and did I use permits? And do I see the site of LBJ in the 60s and the post-2000 society, the benefits? So of course, this is a UCLA question. I used to teach at UCLA, so don't worry, I'm pretty sharp. I always know where the back door is when I'm on a UC campus. And the trap door, by the way. So this is UC Davis. So no, I've never used any, one of the rules I've always had is I never ask permission because the answer is going to be no. And the glorification of a great society of LBJ And of course, you've read this story. LBJ, of course, was so anxious to become president. When Jacqueline Kennedy is splattered in blood standing next to him, he could hardly wait to get to the White House because he was going to open up the drawer and there were all the plans for the Great Society anyway. And so the Great Society, and by the way, you might want to take a look at a photograph of me with Bobby Kennedy in 1968. I had sort of a little quick minor brush with the Great Society, and maybe that's been sort of an effect in that I believe also in the greatness of individuals and the greatness of groups of people and the greatness of humanity to begin with, and the greatness of the power of our minds and our ability to make things that don't exist prior to our existence, and which is what artists do. We make things whether we can see them or not. And so I find that that is sort of a driving force. And the Internet Society, of course, when computers were first introduced, laptops, and the internet was introduced, everyone says, well, everyone's going to make things. But as you know, everyone's playing solitaire. And so they are very much alone in a very big way. And of course, they're competing against an algorithm that's already figured out they're going to lose. And the mere fact that they're playing, they're already considered a loser. And so how do you then incorporate creativity and other aspects of the internet, which of course has vast learning potential and usage. And so I find it to be a way that we can turn it into something that's quite positive, similar to this Zoom interface. So, okay, so let's, I guess, I don't know, you tell me when I'm getting close to the end here, but Amelia has one more piece. So she says, Flower of the Dead is intense. Everyone should get a copy of Amazon. Elaborate so we can direct something can be based on empowerment and creative energy. So, yeah, I guess Flower of the Dead. Yeah, I guess if you to read the book, part of this has to do with recognizing our mortality and also a limited time frame. When I've taught at schools, I've always told my students, particularly the freshmen, I kind of fool them. I said, well, you know, faculty have access to all your records. And I've noticed that your birth certificate is wrong, it's broken. And they go, well, what's wrong with it? Well, there's a line that's missing. They go, well, what's that? I go, it's a line that's the day that you're gonna die. You know, that's missing on your birth certificate. Boy, if we knew what that day was gonna be, we could then function fully, maximally. We're all up in the air as to when that's gonna be. But we all know that we are alive now. And so many people allow that moment to escape them. And so how do we maximize our life experience? And because we are social creatures, how do we maximize our life experience? By sharing what it is that we are experiencing and enjoying and participating and learning from the sharing. And so that in itself, it doesn't mean we have to give things away. It doesn't mean things have to be taken from us, but we must on some level or another, and that another term for that is communication, which has been besmirched by the propaganda of corporate speak. And the idea is like, how do we able to transmit something that's in our mind into someone else's mind? And of course, we notice that when we see something horrific and when we see something beautiful. And the part is we kind of lose touch with that when we see something that's mundane and normative, but it's also simply just as wondrous.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Kerwith has a question, if you have time for another.
Oh, in the 1960s and the 70s. Well, in the 1960s and 70s, I viewed myself as a musician, so I knew all about music. Everything was happening on Hollywood Boulevard. No, there's been many people that have come from Europe and other places, and people that have cornered me in New York, actually while I was in New York, and asked me, how in the fuck do you know this and whatever, who taught you, who followed you and whatever. And the one thing about the 1960s and 70s was we all shared television. Everyone looked at the same screen. but our experiences were quite distant. And in that era, anyone who was participating in the art world was not in East LA and not talking to us. And neither were they from Mexico City. And so many of the things that emerged, and as you look around the world, you will notice that many things occurred seemingly simultaneously, but basically responding to what we were all sharing. And we were all aware of the fact that we were living in dangerous times, and we wanted to survive, and we wanted to have peace, and we still do, and I'm sure you all do.
And my mistake, Pablo Cruz had his hand up.
I can't see because you got your hand up. It's because you're on a different
side. Pablo, I'm very sorry about that. Let's go ahead and unmute you so you can ask your question.
Yeah, just if you could type in your question.
Do that, or we can ask. Or if you would rather just say your question, I think that would be okay.
I was wondering if I could just speak. Hi, Harry. Hola, ¿cómo estás? So I really latched onto something that you mentioned earlier about humor when it comes to regarding Spanish and being a Mexican background, because I'm also from that background. And have you ever found yourself when working on a project where you were utilizing humor and you were like, you know what, I can't talk about that? And was there ever offense, like physically, like metaphorically speaking, that you were like, you know what, I can't push that?
Well, I think very early on, I kind of diverted from some of my counterparts of the performance era. I was never really into put down humor and never into trying to offend people. The people who I might offend are people that hold diametrically opposed ideas than I do. But the work itself might have been considered to be offensive. In fact, Asco, the term Asco for our group, actually came from the Chicano community, in which they would come up to us and tell us, me da asco. That means you make us feel nauseous. We feel like throwing up from all the work you are. And so the idea was originally, even though we thought we were doing work that was important, people found it to be offensive early on. And so it's always been a struggle from the beginning. As I mentioned, you know, my first performance piece unknowingly was wearing a dunce cap, which again, and of course, one of the ideas that I mentioned before was that I turned that dunce cap and inverted it and turned it into a loudspeaker, turned it into a megaphone. And so, and what came out of that at the other end was English, a very precise English. And you better get a copy of the newest copy of Oxford Dictionary to understand what the fuck I just said. So yeah, so that's, and of course I utilize street vernacular as well as what I might find strolling along in Nottingham.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Pablo. Again, sorry for that. Thank you all for all your attendance. Thank you, Harry, for all your great generous time that you've given us and your great words and sharing so much with us.
Thank you everyone for taking your time off during this period. And I wish you and all of your families well. And I'm looking forward to seeing all your work. And by the way, if anyone needs to get in touch, you can just always send me an email through the CalArts faculty page on the photo media, or you could probably find it on somewhere. It's online. Okay. So everyone have a really great day. Everyone stay safe. Thank you, Cass.
Yes, and thank you very much. And thank you again for joining us. And just to give you guys a heads up, next week we do have Joe Fife joining us for our last lecture of the spring quarter. You can find that information on our Art Studios webpage. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you again for Harry Gamboa Jr. Much appreciated. And everyone be well.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.